There is a common money belief that can really sabotage your finances, and you may not even realize that you have it. And so, in today's video, we're going to dive into what that belief about money is and how you can break free of something that may be holding you back from building long term wealth. If you're new to this channel, hello, I'm Sarah Edens. I'm a financial consultant and educator, and I'm here to bring you evidence-based videos about personal finance and building your wealth that will really help you start to achieve financial freedom. So if all that sounds interesting to you, then please hit that subscribe button and let's get started. So what is this core belief about money that keeps you poor, holds you back, potentially sabotages your finances? At the end of the day, it's a belief that I'll never have enough. And it's often referred to as a scarcity mindset. Now, I want to be very clear here and not confuse scarcity mindset with actual poverty, the state of actually not having enough resources to meet your very basic needs. That's not what we're talking about in the video today. Poverty is something that is a highly stressful situation, highly intense place to be when you're constantly dealing with pressure about how to afford basic necessities and keep a roof over your house head, that kind of thing. So when we talk about scarcity mindset, we're not referring to poverty. We're referring to a state where you most likely have enough resources to meet your basic needs of survival at least, but perhaps you've inherited beliefs about money from parents or grandparents even who went through times of extreme hardship and extreme deprivation. And those narratives around money really do get passed down generationally. So let's dive into scarcity mindset and what happens when you have this core belief, whether it's yours or something that you've inherited or learned from someone else that says, I'll never have enough. So the first thing here to pay attention to is it kind of manifests in different ways. So the first thing is we look at some of the evidence around, is scarcity mindset really a thing? Because you hear people talk about this a lot in terms of scarcity mindset. Its opposite being abundance mindset. There's a lot of talk about this, but is it real or is it just in everyone's heads? Well, there's a very interesting study that they did in the Netherlands in 2019, and participants were randomly induced into scarcity mindset and abundance mindset. So they took one group and put them into a scarcity mindset and one into an abundance mindset. This was not based on real situations of poverty. And I really like this study because Princeton did a study a few years ago as well about scarcity mindset, but they studied people who were living in very difficult situations of dire poverty. And I feel like there's a big difference there because when you're in a situation of dire poverty, you are going to be stressed 100% of the time, basically. And we know that stress around any topic, whether it's money, finances, relationships, you name it, is going to cause stress. Stress makes our brains react differently, and we just have lower cognitive functioning overall when we're stressed about anything. So as you can imagine, people who live in poverty all the time are constantly stressed, and their cognitive function is very much affected by dealing with that level of stress. So what was different about this study in the Netherlands was that the researchers wanted to see, independent from people who were experiencing poverty, how this scarcity and abundance mindset manifested when they actually did brain studies with functional MRI on participants. And so that's exactly what they did. I will link to this whole study in the description box if you want to look at it yourself. It's fascinating. So basically what they did is they randomly picked groups to either induce a scarcity mindset or an abundance mindset. And then they had the same individuals make purchasing decisions while undergoing a functional MRI scan. So they could look at the different areas of the brain and how they lit up and how the brain functioned when they were having these people kind of programmed in the lab to either have a scarcity mindset towards money or an abundance mindset. The key findings were fascinating. So a scarcity mindset in the participants actually increased activity in valuation areas, which is the orbitofrontal cortex, part of your brain that makes those decisions, trying to decide how much are things worth. And it made people actually overvalue items. So when they were asked how much they thought something was worth, they would actually think it was worth more than it actually was. At the same time, in those same people with the scarcity mindset in the lab, they decreased activity in the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that's critical for both planning and impulse control. And this led to more impulsive, short-term, short-sighted decisions around money when they put them into these experimental conditions. And so it's really fascinating that what we tell ourselves about money actually then affects our brain, actually affects the way that we make decisions about money, affects how we see value, all of these things. So absolutely fascinating study. Why this study is just a great, strong example of how scarcity mindset works and how much it affects us when it comes to money. It was randomized within subject intervention in the study. So they weren't accounting for all of the different factors that people in the poverty studies had with their participants, of them being just generally stressed across the board. They brought people in who were not undergoing lifestyle stress day to day, and had a very controlled study. So fascinating there. So you can see then with the study and what they saw with that functional MRI, that the neural evidence in the brain and how it responded and how they were able to view this during the study really backs up the behavioral effects of mapping the exact brain circuits involved when we put the participants or when the researchers put the participants in either scarcity mindset or abundance mindset. So it really showed that scarcity, when we are in that mindset of scarcity around money, saying there's never going to be enough, it really changed both valuation and impulsivity. And it wasn't just down to sheer cognitive load. If you think about people living in poverty and the just overall cognitive overload that they end up with having to deal with stressful situations and not enough of anything 24/7, to be able to have this lab controlled study and then look at the functional MRI was absolutely fascinating. So this is the first study that I have really seen that I felt like presented profound evidence for the fact that it's really, really important to be careful what we're telling ourselves about money, and obviously what we're telling ourselves about the rest of our lives as well, because it just affects so much. But in terms of not just having like a positive mindset, but a mindset of abundance, a mindset of saying, yes, there is enough to meet my needs. I can accomplish the things I want to accomplish in my life. And so that's really fascinating scientific evidence for that. The second thing to really think about is that your beliefs about money really do become self-fulfilling. I mean, we've seen how profoundly they affect our brain and our cognitive function when we go into that scarcity mindset. Another kind of belief around this is, I'll never figure out how to become wealthy. It can feel very daunting and very overwhelming to be confronted with a situation where you know that you want to get to a certain level with your finances, but you're just simply not sure how. And so if you're locked in a scarcity mindset, you may be telling yourself, I'll never figure out how to become wealthy. This is just too hard. I'm just going to settle for, whatever. And so these limiting beliefs really shape our actions, especially around things like risk, investing, and career growth. Because if you're telling yourself you won't make it, then you're probably not very likely to take any of the action or any of the steps involved in moving in the direction of your dreams, because you've already told yourself it won't work out. So then it's much easier to just sit on the sofa and watch Netflix than take any kind of action when you've already convinced yourself you're going to be a failure from the start. And so this was really fascinating. There was a 2023 study that was done that found that individuals with a strong locus of control, which just means that they felt in control of their lives, when combined with both high quality financial learning and financial self-efficacy, were significantly more likely to plan ahead and accumulate wealth. So it's really, really key to remember that, like anything else, financial skills are something that we learn over time, we develop over time. We can learn these skills. They're not just for the rich or for the entitled or whatever. They're for each and every one of us to be able to access. And with the internet and with just the explosion of access to financial tools online and even like consumer-focused planning software, all of these different things, there's just so much within our reach, wonderful books out there, just so many different ways to be able to educate ourselves about finances. So it really comes down to, again, though, Do you believe that you can learn about this particular area? And obviously, since you're watching this video, you do. And don't forget to share this with somebody who might benefit from this video as well, and from this perspective, if they're struggling with their finances and just need some kind of positive reframing of this whole situation. It's absolutely possible to learn these skills. Another interesting thing is that the behavioral economist Dan Ariely, he's also shown that money behaviors are strongly influenced by both perception and identity, and not just numbers, income, and math skills. And that's really important to remember. I think there's a real misconception that to be able to be good with money, you have to be good at math. There is almost no correlation whatsoever between those two skills, is something that Dan Ariely found when he was doing research on this area. And it's really, obviously, it helps to be able to add and subtract, but these days there's apps on your phone for that if you just can't be bothered. But it's really, really key to have the mindset in place, as well as some basic math skills, obviously, but you don't have to pull out your geometry or trigonometry for this. Nothing complicated whatsoever. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. Just anyway, if you subconsciously believe that wealth isn't for you, you're going to be throwing up these artificial obstacles in your path that will really hold you back from taking that action in the future, even if you're not aware of it. Sometimes our thoughts are a little bit sneaky because they'll just kind of be running in a loop in the background, and we won't be consciously going around thinking, there's not enough, I'll never become wealthy. Perhaps these aren't conscious things, but try and catch yourself if you're finding variations of this floating through your brain. And remember that it's so important, the messages that we tell ourselves about finances. It's so key, influences our brain patterns and our brain waves, influences our decision making, and so forth. The third thing to think about too with this is another type of thought that you might find floating around in your brain that's not going to be helpful here, is telling yourself, well, I'm just not good with money, and almost using that as an excuse to not building your financial skills, to not dedicating to building more wealth, is just say, well, I'm just not good with money. I very unfortunately hear a lot of women in particular say this, well, I'm just not good with money. And the fact of the matter is that it's absolutely critical to stop saying that, because you might not be good with money today, and that's fine. But like I said, it's key to remember that you can learn all the skills. So you might not be good with money today, but if you invest in the time, energy, and learning process, you will be good with money, and you will just be progressively better as you go along. So it's, again, something that you can change. But I hear a lot of people, especially women, kind of using this as an excuse or an escape clause to sort of then be able to explain why they don't have a budget, or why they don't have a retirement plan, or they've never really bothered with retirement planning, or why they haven't done certain things that are key things in terms of building wealth, why they're not investors, for example. Well, I'm just not good with money. And so just don't let yourself off the hook that easily, because you can become better with money even if that's the case today. A 2022 FINRA study found that many Americans experience financial anxiety, and I think anxiety can drive a lot of this as well, too, of just feeling anxious about a whole new aspect of your life that you don't know much about, finances. But this study found that based on both their age bracket and annual income, it really was, it varied. So people who were younger experienced more anxiety about finances, as well as people who were in lower income brackets experienced more anxiety. And so a lot of that comes down to whether it's stress around money or just lack of experience around how to manage their finances, perhaps some of both. Financial anxiety, though, can really lead people to do things like avoid checking their bank balances or leave bills unpaid. And then that kind of snowballs, right? And then you end up with expensive late fees or bills that you missed paying completely and have, God forbid, something like your utilities shut off. So it's really, really a kind of vicious cycle if you're feeling anxious about money and you're using things like saying, well, I'm just not good with money as an excuse not to take steps and learn. And then from there, you can just kind of make your financial situation even worse by putting things off, procrastinating, and that kind of thing. And there's another great resource for you that I think you'll enjoy kind of along these lines, and I'll link to it in the description. It's a book called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. You may have heard of this already. But according to Morgan Housel, your financial success is more about behavior than about your intelligence or your math skills. He has a great quote from the book. He says, "Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave." And so that's really, really important to remember, that taking control of your finances, even if you're overwhelmed, even if you've got kind of a pattern of a scarcity mindset and some of this is resonating with you, these are all absolutely things that you can change. So what's a money belief that you've carried around along these lines with this scarcity mindset that no longer serves you and you're ready to jettison and get rid of? Please let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you. I always read all of the comments. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you again soon.